The station buzzed with hurried footsteps, echoing announcements, and the sharp scent of cold rain mixing with diesel. She stood at the edge of the platform, gripping a small suitcase so tightly her knuckles whitened. The wind caught a stray strand of her hair, tossing it against her cheek, but she didn't brush it away. Her eyes, dark, searching, were fixed not on the crowd but on the shattered pot lying among the cracked tiles. A single broken piece of clay, sharp and jagged like a fractured heart, caught the weak light. The remains of the ficus, her husband's pride, his quiet obsession, scattered like secrets she hadn't been ready to hold. She'd moved it, just once, while he was away. It was a small act, a careless one, but the crash had shattered more than just a plant. Her hands trembled, as if the fragile shards whispered blame. Fingers traced invisible cracks in the air, longing for something to hold on to, something whole. The suitcase beside her bore a faded red scarf tied to its handle, the color vivid against the dull metal and leather. That scarf had belonged to him, a silent witness to every goodbye, every whispered promise they'd exchanged. Now it flapped softly in the breeze like a wounded flag, refusing to surrender. Around her, the crowd flowed like a river of strangers, their faces blurred by tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed. The voices were distant, hollow, words she couldn't quite catch. Somewhere, a child laughed. Somewhere else, a train rumbled closer. She swallowed hard. Why did the ficus have to break? The question burned behind her eyes, unanswered and relentless. Her gaze flicked upward, to the sky now heavy with gathering clouds, and she thought of the moments before he left, his last glance, steady but distant, the promise that he'd be back before the ficus could even wilt. But the ficus had shattered. And so had something inside her. A hand brushed against hers, warm and unexpected. She startled, blinking away the sudden sharpness in her chest. No one met her eyes. No one spoke. The red scarf flared again, caught by the wind, a silent signal. She whispered to herself, barely audible above the station's chaos, "I didn't mean for this to happen." But the broken pieces around her seemed to answer, cold and unforgiving, "It's already happened." Her breath hitched as the train's horn cried out, a sound both urgent and final. The suitcase shifted at her feet, the scarlet ribbon fluttering like a heartbeat struggling to stay alive. She didn't move. The ficus lay shattered, the red scarf trembled, and the quiet inside her was louder than any crowd. Something had broken, more than just clay, and it was waiting for her to face the fragments. She didn't notice the stranger watching her, not at first. His eyes, calm and steady, followed the way her fingers clenched the handle of the suitcase again, twisting the red scarf into a tight knot, as if it could hold her together. The station hummed around her, but inside, time folded backward. Her mind drifted, pulled by the thread of memory. "Never let go of what grounds you," her father used to say, his voice low and steady like the rhythm of the old clock on the kitchen wall. She'd clung to those words in the quiet nights when the electricity failed and the shadows crept too close. That scarf, the one wrapped around the suitcase, had once belonged to her mother, passed down in silence. It was a fragment of warmth, a token from a life before all the breaks and cracks. Back then, she remembered gripping a small suitcase just like this one, the fabric worn thin, the zipper struggling to hold her fragile hopes. At 10 years old, she'd stood on a platform much like this, watching her father leave for a job in a distant city, promising to come back soon. She had thought it would be like any other goodbye, but it wasn't. The silence afterward stretched into years. She blinked away the past and looked around the station. Families embraced with urgent kisses and wet eyes, children tugged at coats, and laughter bubbled like a river finally breaking free. And there she was, standing alone, her breath shallow, her heart heavier than the suitcase beside her. Loneliness had settled deep, wrapping tight like the red scarf's fabric, a reminder of all the times she'd been left behind, waiting for something or someone to come back whole. The ficus had been his. He loved that plant with a quiet devotion she never understood. Maybe it was the way he cared for it, the slow, deliberate watering, the soft pruning, small acts that said, I am here, I am holding on. When he left, the ficus became a symbol of waiting, of keeping things alive through absence. And now it lay shattered. Her hands trembled again, and the stranger's gaze deepened. He didn't say a word, but it wasn't indifferent silence. It was intentional, like he was giving her the space she didn't know she needed. She shifted her weight, glancing down at the red scarf once more. It fluttered like a fragile heartbeat, worn but defiant. Her fingers traced the rough edge of the fabric, feeling the threads catch and fray, much like herself. I'm trying, she thought. Trying to keep everything from falling apart. The suitcase, the scarf, the shattered ficus, they weren't just objects. They were pieces of her story, the promises broken, the love stretched thin, the waiting that never seemed to end. The train that was supposed to bring him back had been delayed, and every minute stretched longer than the last. She caught herself holding her breath, eyes fixed on the tracks, willing the train to appear. The crowd shifted around her, voices rising and falling, but the tension inside her held steady, like a taut string about to snap. The stranger stepped a little closer, still silent, his presence both comforting and unnerving. She wanted to ask him who he was, why he stayed, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she looked up and managed a smile, small, uncertain, like the first crack of dawn breaking through a storm. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and in that brief exchange, something unspoken passed between them. The announcement crackled over the speakers again, train arriving on platform 2. Her heart jumped, and she took a step forward, then stopped. The goodbye wasn't ready. Not yet. The scarf caught the breeze once more, trembling in the gray light. The ficus, the suitcase, the waiting, they all waited with her. And she stood there, caught between what was lost and what might still come. The sky darkened suddenly, thick clouds rolling over the station like a slow tide, swallowing the weak afternoon light. A sharp breeze stirred the red scarf tied to her suitcase, twisting it tighter around the handle as if it, too, was holding on against the coming storm. The stranger shifted his weight, his worn leather shoes scraping softly on the concrete. She noticed the scuffed soles, the way they looked like they'd traveled far, too far to be just another commuter. His coat, heavy but faded, hung loosely on his frame, shoulders bent with a tiredness she recognized all too well. For a long moment, they stood like two strangers in a fragile truce, the crowd's noise dimming beneath the gathering rumble of thunder. The station's glass roof rattled softly as the first drops of rain began to fall, scattering like hesitant tears. Her eyes flicked to the wallet peeking from his coat pocket, a battered photograph pressed between its folds. She caught the glimpse of a smiling woman, a child, frozen in a moment of warmth she hadn't felt in months. It was an invisible mirror, reflecting her own fractured hope back at her. He met her gaze, and in that look, she saw it, the weight of waiting, the ache of absence, the quiet battle to hold oneself together when everything threatens to unravel. Maybe he was waiting too. Maybe he carried his own suitcase filled with memories, broken promises, and fragile love. The rain thickened, slicking the platform, mingling with the cold that crept into her bones. Inside, a storm raged just as fierce, between the ache of needing to leave, to finally move on, and the strange pull that kept her rooted in place. Why do I feel this way? She thought, heart pounding. Is this fate or something else? Her hands tightened on the suitcase handle, the red scarf biting into her skin. The ficus, her husband's ficus, had shattered because of her carelessness, or maybe because it was never meant to survive. She wasn't sure anymore what was real and what was illusion. The lines between love, guilt, and hope blurred, tangled like the roots of that broken plant. The stranger took a small step closer, but his eyes remained guarded, unreadable. There was no sudden confession, no promise. Just silence, a silence that spoke louder than any words could. She wanted to ask him why he stayed, why he watched without interfering. Was he a guardian of broken souls? A reflection of her own loneliness? Or was he waiting to lead her away from this place, this moment? The train's arrival announcement crackled faintly, a reminder that time was moving even if she wasn't. Her heart beat faster, torn between boarding the train and stepping back into a life unraveling with every shattered shard. Thunder rolled overhead, echoing the turmoil inside her. The rain soaked through her coat, chilling her to the bone, but she didn't move to shelter herself. She was trapped between what she needed to do and what she feared to face. The stranger shifted again, pulling the wallet deeper into his pocket. His eyes flickered with something almost like regret, or was it warning? She couldn't tell. Her breath caught. The red scarf whipped fiercely now, like a flag raised in defiance or surrender. The fragile thread between hope and despair stretched thinner. Was she standing on the edge of something new, or falling deeper into a fracture that would never heal? The rain blurred the edges of the station, the crowd, the stranger's silent watch. And in that blur, she hesitated, caught between the past she could no longer hold and the future she wasn't sure she wanted. No answers came. Only the relentless rhythm of rain, the distant thunder, and the weight of two broken souls, standing face to face in the storm. The rain had settled into a steady rhythm now, drumming softly against the station's glass roof, weaving a quiet hymn of gray. She stood at the edge of the platform, suitcase at her side, the red scarf wrapped tighter than ever around the handle. Every drop felt like a pulse against her skin, cold and insistent, reminding her she was still alive, still holding on. She took a shaky step forward, then another, her breath shallow and uneven, the weight of everything pressing down like the storm overhead. Her eyes flicked to the stranger, who hadn't moved, watching her with that same quiet intensity. His presence was a shadow, a mirror she couldn't quite turn away from. A mother nearby glanced at her, eyes sharp with something she couldn't name. Sympathy? Judgment? The silent language of strangers who see pain but don't speak it aloud. A few others stole furtive looks too, their whispers curling like smoke in the damp air, the invisible walls of society closing in without a word. Some people carry more than just bags, she thought. They carry silence. Her hands trembled so violently she nearly dropped the suitcase. The red scarf fluttered loose, slipping free from the handle like a secret escaping into the wind. Time slowed as the stranger reached out, slow, deliberate, and caught it before it hit the wet ground. For a moment, their eyes met, and the world seemed to hold its breath. He held the scarf gently between his fingers, the scarlet fabric vivid against his dark coat, a fragile thread tying them both to a story neither fully understood. She took a step back, the urge to run crashing over her like a wave. But before she could move, she stopped, her heart catching in her throat. One last look, just one, back toward the shattered ficus, the broken pieces of a life she once believed in. Her lips parted, voice barely a whisper. I didn't mean to break it, or us. The stranger's eyes softened, but he said nothing. His silence was a language all its own, one that spoke of regret, of things left unsaid, of paths that might have been. She wanted to ask him if he felt it too, the fracture running between hope and despair, the quiet battle to hold on when everything wanted to fall apart. But the words tangled, lost beneath the roar of the rain and the pounding of her own heart. A child nearby tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing at her with wide, curious eyes. The mother glanced over, her smile tight and polite, but there was a flicker of unease, a silent question hanging between them like a shadow. The crowd continued to move, indifferent yet heavy with unseen judgments. In their eyes, she was the woman who lost her way, who shattered more than just a plant, a symbol of failure whispered beneath the hum of 1,000 footsteps. She swallowed hard, feeling the sting of that quiet condemnation. But beneath it all, there was something else, a fragile thread of connection, pulled taut between her and the stranger holding the red scarf. Some people carry more than just bags, they carry silence, she thought again. The suitcase sat heavy at her side, the red scarf now resting in his palm like a fragile promise or a warning. She hesitated, the edge of the platform both a boundary and a crossroads. The train's distant whistle pierced the air, urgent and impossible to ignore. She wanted to step forward, to leave behind the shattered ficus, the waiting, the pain. But something held her still. The stranger's gaze didn't waver, but there was no invitation there, only a silent witness to the storm raging inside her. And in that moment, suspended between rain and thunder, between leaving and staying, between breaking and holding together, she realized this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something unspoken, fragile as the red scarf fluttering softly in his hand, something that might heal or might break again. But for now, all that remained was the silence. The rain had softened to a drizzle, the station now a blur of muted colors and damp footsteps. She stood frozen, the red scarf still clasped in the stranger's hand, her mind spinning faster than the world around her. Then, without warning, he reached into his coat and pulled out a slim envelope, worn at the edges, the handwriting delicate but unmistakable. Her name. She blinked, confusion and disbelief tangled in her chest. "I wasn't sure how to find you," he said softly, voice low enough for only her to hear. "But I had to try." The envelope felt heavier than it looked, like it carried the weight of everything she hadn't known she was waiting for. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside was a letter, not just any letter, but one from the very company she'd applied to weeks ago, the one she hoped would be her fresh start. The letter offered an invitation to an exclusive interview, one she hadn't expected to receive so soon. Her eyes started up, meeting his gaze again. "You're the owner?" He nodded, a faint sadness flickering behind his eyes. "I'm the one who runs the company." But more than that, he hesitated, then added quietly, "This scarf belonged to my daughter. She was gone before you ever came into my life." The red scarf suddenly shimmered with a new meaning, no longer just a symbol of waiting or brokenness, but a relic of loss and love intertwined. It was a reminder of fragile ties stretched thin across time, the scars we carry hidden beneath the surface. Her mind raced back to the phrase she'd whispered earlier, the echo bouncing now with painful clarity. Some people carry more than just bags. They carry silence. She hadn't known how true those words were, how silence could be a vessel for grief, for hope, for secrets waiting to unravel. Her breath caught as she realized she'd reached a point of no return. This wasn't just a chance meeting on a rainy platform, it was a crossroads carved from heartbreak and possibility. The weight of the suitcase beside her felt heavier now, not just with her belongings, but with everything she carried inside, regrets, dreams, shattered faith. The stranger, no, the man, offered a quiet look that said everything and nothing. An invitation without promises. A doorway without guarantees. She felt the tug of the future pulling her forward, and for the first time, the courage to step through it. Without a word, she lifted the suitcase and followed him through the winding corridors of the station, toward a waiting room where everything could change. Outside, the rain ceased, leaving behind a sky brushed with tentative light. And inside, she knew that the story she thought was ending was only just beginning. The waiting room was small, dimly lit, the scent of rain still lingering in the stale air. She stood near the window, watching the platform below, where once she had been the woman clutching a broken suitcase, surrounded by strangers who whispered silent judgments. Now, the scene played out in reverse. Passengers passed her by, eyes flickering with curiosity or indifference, but she no longer felt like the fractured fragment in the crowd. He sat across from her, the red scarf folded carefully on the table between them. It was no longer just a piece of fabric, it was a story, a bridge between past and present, loss and hope. "I chose you," he said quietly, voice heavy with something she hadn't expected. "Not because I love you, not yet. But because you remind me of her." Her breath caught, the weight of his words pressing down like the first heavy drops of a coming storm. She had known this wasn't simple. She had seen the way grief clung to him like a shadow, how the scarf carried memories that were his alone. He reached out, picking up the scarf and holding it as if it were both a balm and a burden. She loved this plant, he said, eyes distant. The ficus. It was her favorite. I kept it alive for her, but when you shattered it, something changed. She swallowed hard, the guilt twisting deep inside. I never meant to break it. He nodded, almost kindly, but his gaze was resolute. Sometimes, breaking is necessary. Her fingers trembled as she took the scarf from him, their hands brushing an electric, fragile moment. She understood then, this was not about replacement or reunion. It was about reckoning. About sacrifice. I want to give it back to you, she said softly. Not just the scarf, but everything I carry, the mistakes, the waiting. He looked at her, surprised, the tension in his shoulders easing. Maybe some silences aren't meant to be filled, she continued, but honored. I can't be her, but I can carry her memory with respect. He stood, folding the scarf carefully and slipping it into his coat pocket. Then you understand. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The platform gleamed under the pale sun breaking through clouds. The ficus pot, once shattered, had been replaced, a quiet symbol of fragile renewal. She turned to leave, the suitcase lighter now, the red scarf's weight no longer hers to bear. As she stepped onto the platform, the roles had shifted. No longer the woman broken by absence, but someone who had chosen to let go, who carried silence not as a wound, but as a story reclaimed. Behind her, the man watched in quiet gratitude, not for love, but for the courage to face what had been broken, and to let it be reborn. And somewhere in the soft rustle of leaves, the ficus whispered its own fragile promise, that even shattered things could grow again. 17.